You're right, guys. Shay here. Only going to bounce up you guys are well. So it's my first live stream for some time. As you know, I've been kind of out of the game for a couple of months, but I'm back now and I've gone full circle. If you've been with me for a few months, you'll know that my very first interview that I had pre-lockdown was with this man, as you can see here, Rajiv Radhakrishnan. How you doing, Rajiv?
Yes, very good. Thank you. Hope you're staying safe in the current climate.
Yeah, they're staying safe. Obviously, I remember we obviously met in February this year. It's 9 months ago now. We met at Carluccio's in St John's Wood. I think it was. I can't remember, but somewhere around that way. Maybe Pinnerware. I can't remember. But yeah, I remember just like normal, wasn't it? It's like normal kind of lifestyle. Just walk in, have a coffee, nice coffee, sit down. No need to like social distance, etc. So yeah, it's good to have you back on, Rajiv.
Thank you.
Obviously, at the time we were discussing what was going to be the Sri Lanka versus England Test series. Today, obviously, it's a bit more serious, and much more hard-hitting topic in light of what's happened recently. Kind of all starts with the BLM movement, but I know obviously you and I, Rajiv, have been speaking about kind of racial attitudes in Southeast Asian cricket and surrounding contexts and what's come to light with the BLM movement. And I know you obviously got a few points to get off your chest, some things that you wanted to discuss. Before we get into it properly, Rajiv, I think maybe you should introduce yourself to the audience and kind of your background, especially in terms of cricket. Just give us a little bit of detail about yourself.
Sure. So Rajiv, it's my first name. Huge cricket enthusiast. I have been since I was 7 years old. Lived in England pretty much all my life, and I would say that I'm very much more interested in Test cricket. One-day cricket has become more of an interest in light of what's happened last year with England winning the World Cup. That was great. T20, I tend not to discuss so much about. I write about it, get published in the Cricketer magazine quite a bit, and they in fact gave me an online column 3 years ago, and I've submitted some online articles there. And I've also printed article in the Cricketer magazine in 2018, October. So yeah, I love writing, and I still play as well. And I'm interested in the history of the game as well.
Yeah, I think I referred to you in the description this evening as a cricket historian. I know obviously you're an analyst as well, but I know you very much enjoy cricket from going decades past, as some of your articles have indicated. So Rajiv, today, I mean, kind of over to you really. I know also you wanted to maybe give some context to what you want to discuss. Do you just want to crack on really? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think these issues were sort of always in the background with me growing up at school, and I think they just came more to the surface in light of what happened in America this year with George Floyd, sadly. And I think it's important that I think we express the issues that are happening in every single community across the world. And of course, Black Lives Matter, I'm not denying that, of course not. But I think we also, whilst we still remember that, we also look at other areas in the subcontinent where I think there's a lot of anger between from the sort of the southern states and Sri Lanka, and how they're sort of perceived and subconsciously treated by their northern neighbours. Now, it's different to say something like apartheid South Africa, where there was a clear policy of oppression towards a particular community or communities. There certainly is that. There's certainly not that in South Asia to that extent. And growing up at school in Northwest London as an 11-year-old, right up until now, I grew up with a lot of South Asians from the northern states of the subcontinent. And I'll say this now, they're still my very good friends, my best friends, and they know that I've raised this issue, and they've said, at the end of the day, we were young, we were having a laugh. Of course they were. It's not the end of the world, but I still think it's something important that has to be raised, and I think not so much for the South Asian community, but for the West to understand it as well, and I think that's really important. As an example, Shay, so 11 years old, my first day at secondary school, came in and sat down in the form room, nervous, and I was at a good school, a very good private school in Northwest London. And my first day, a senior student, he would have been about 15, I think, said, I sat in I was in his classroom, but I was waiting for my lesson anyway. So he just said, "Oh, are you from Sri Lanka?" So I just said innocently, "Yeah, I am originally." And he just said, he was a Gujarati Indian guy, I remember, and he said, "Oh, I can tell because you're black and you're ugly." So that was my first day at secondary school. Now, yes, we were young. We all say things that we didn't mean. But for me, if an Indian guy had come into school and if a white person had said that to him, "Oh, you're Indian, you're this and this," that Indian would have complained. The whole Indian community would have gone up in uproar. Quite rightly. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. They should have. They should have. And there would have been a huge drama about that particular incident. It's racist and all this, which is absolutely true. But if a Sri Lankan is doing it within the South Asian context, then his voice isn't as loud. No one really cares. It's like, for a start, there's not many of us. The population of Sri Lankans is nothing in England, and it's only 20 million, and in England it's far less than any northern Indian states. So that sort of set I was 11. I didn't really register what had happened, and then as I went through school, I noticed those little jibes that would come through. When Sri Lanka were winning the World Cup in 1996, I got the comments like, "Oh, it's a day-night final against Australia. Will they be able to see the players? When they smile, you can just
This is from Indian fellow students,
exactly." That's a very good point. This is coming from Indian people. That the white community, to be honest, they think we all look the same, and I don't mean that in a flippant way, but they can't really see the difference, which is fine. So that's a very good point. The taunts and the jibes were coming all from the Indians, and when I say Indians, I mean North Indians. And in my school year, I was the only Sri Lankan and all Tamil and all South Indian in the whole year. All of them from Gujarat and Punjab, mainly those two states. So yes, I got those comments about Aravinda de Silva, Murali, etc. So whilst I was really proud of Sri Lanka winning, I got those jibes. Then I got to uni, and I had my first ever girlfriend. For a lot of people, that's quite a surprise for me getting a girlfriend, but that's another issue. Anyway, so she was a girl from Hong Kong, but of Indian Gujarati extraction. And when she was interested in cricket, and I wanted to share this enthusiasm with her, but again, from her, so from the jibes from school, now it translated into something more like a sort of a disgust and a look like a sneering attitude. She'd be like, "Yeah, I know." And when I said, "Oh, do you want to go and watch a game Sri Lanka play?" She'd be like, "Yeah, I'm not really interested in that team." It's like, they're like really quite dark, and they're just looking at them. It was a real kind of disgust kind of look, and she was almost unhappy talking about it. It made her upset.
But she was a cricket fan.
She was a huge cricket fan.
See, honestly, so you really feel, Rajiv, that she was put off by watching Sri Lanka because of the tone of the player's skin? Is that really the case, or?
100%. At the time, I'll come back to what she's like now, and she's a different person. But in the late 1990s, when I got into university in 97, so I met her in my third year, 99. That's the sort of emotion I got from her. It's like that sneering, disgust, and then that disgust turned to sort of like an anger, like, "Oh, I just don't want to see them play." So I'm okay, fine, that's great.
I never heard anything like that.
Yeah, it was it was only between me and her. It was a very dismissive. And then when I got my first job at a bank, so after graduation, then this is my third sort of chapter in receiving these taunts. And by the way, all through this, I'm not responding. I'm not replying.
I was going to say, how did you feel about your girlfriend?
Sorry?
How did you feel about your girlfriend saying these things? I mean, you're dating her.
Well,
what happened? Did you just dump her afterwards? What happened?
I didn't respond. I was not emotionally or mature-wise ability to construct my response. I just held it all in. Having said that, at school I did lose my temper a few times with, and because of the boys, I could show my vent that anger. You can't do it with a female, right? You can't really do anything. So I did vent it at school, and we now laugh about it. But anyway, so then I got to my first job at a bank, and there was this guy, Gujarati Indian, who had to keep telling me. Now he didn't have the disgust look, he didn't have the anger look. His was more like a sort of like the way, say, like a swan-like sort of sighing and weighing. Yeah, my ancestors, like from the Aryan race, they descended from Alexander the Great, so they're fairer skinned, and you're from the Dravidian race, and you're probably African ancestry. So again, it was my first week in my new job. I'm not going to say anything back to this, but he would have to keep telling me this. So he had to keep telling me that this was this and this was, and then now I'm 21, 22, and I'm thinking, okay, now it's getting a bit much now. It keeps happening. Yes, you can have the jibes and you can have the light-hearted humor. I've got no problem with that.
Yeah.
But when it's being said in a anger, sick, disgusting, and arrogant sort of superiority complex kind of way, that's when it becomes a little bit more difficult to take. And I also then noticed, being a cricket fan, is I've just got some notes I'm referring to. Like another example, when I was at university, I said to one of my Indian friends, I'm going to the Sri Lankan Society thing. And then all the Indians started laughing. They're going, oh, yeah, will you be seen there? I mean, it's going to be really dark. We're going to have to turn the lights on. And, again, I go back to that point. If a Western guy, these are the things I heard, from very close friends. And again, if a Western guy had said, oh, I'm not going to the Indian Society, you guys are too dark. Can you imagine the outfall of that? Can you imagine what would happen? Oh my goodness. There would be protests, there would this. But if it happens to Sri Lankan from an Indian or North Indian, then nothing happens. And I go, and I remember one particular day, and I was at university in London, one particular guy said the word colour, Kala, K-A-L-A. I can't know if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. And I think that's the same word in Sri Lanka. I think it is the same word, but I can't speak any of the languages anyway. And then they all started smirking. Again, Indian people. Now, one other Pakistani guy, he heard it, and he said, stop what you're doing. And he protected me. I'm not in touch with him now. He defended me. But for me, that's the equivalent of the disgusting, wretched N-word. But they got away with it, and they were all laughing and smirking and speaking in their northern language, which I can't understand. I can't understand the southern one anyway. So it was all of these kind of things, and then there was a time when at school as well. I had, like, for example, I had these statues at my parents' house. These like African-looking statues, like black statues, not just like some artwork. And one of my Indian friends go, oh, so these must be your ancestors. That they had to keep bringing in the African thing, or, oh, what, you look like an Aborigine, you're this. So all of these comments are coming through, and then I was turning around and said, you know what? If I do look like an Aborigine, so what? What's wrong with looking like that? I have darker skin than you, Shay, and what's your next point? Not you personally. What's your next point? Okay, it's a fact. It's an evolutionary thing. What is it? I would like to go back to these people who've said that, and I have, in fact. What do you want me to do about it? And secondly, it's not actually my fault if it is the fault in the first place, which I don't think it is, which it isn't. And then I'd like to ask them, what's your next point? Okay, I may be Dravidian, my ancestors might be African. Okay, what's your next point? And that's what I'd like to ask. What are you trying to prove? Why are you trying to prove or tell me that you're from some fair-skinned ancestry? What is your point? You don't complain that I'm left-handed, which I am, because why? Because it's not my fault. I was just born like that. So why are you complaining about this? I was just born like this, And if you don't like it and you don't find it attractive, fine, that's your opinion. But you don't have to see me. I'm not forcing you to see me. I'm not going to cover my face. If you want, cover your eyes so you don't see the dark skin. And if you don't want to go to, if you think Sri Lankans are less attractive, fine. It doesn't mean you have to tell me about it every day. And then, sorry.
Oh, so, well, thank you for sharing, obviously, some quite personal stories there, Rajiv. I mean, I've got my own kind of tale to tell, which I've kind of shared a little bit on this channel when I discussed that Asim Rafiq video and the racial abuse that he received whilst at Yorkshire. So I wanted to go back into that, but obviously with the people of Asian descent have all, well, that's not right to say all, but obviously a lot of us have experienced at one time or another, racial abuse if you're in certain towns and cities, etc. But But this is slightly different. I mean, I think when people think about racial abuse, you generally think about two different races entirely. Obviously, we're talking here about Sri Lankans and Indian people. I think you're obviously referring to here, which is the prejudice that you've come up against. And obviously, in light of what's happened this year, obviously the Black Lives Matter movement has obviously been huge. It's been a pinnacle moment already, I'd say, in Black history, you could say. And so it's obviously infused into cricket as well, as we've seen over the last few months. I mean, started in particular with England kind of showing the way in the West Indies series. And then we also saw it in South Africa as well with the 3TC competition. We've seen it less so in other sports. And we also see it in football, Premier League football, English Premier League football. It's been there as well. And we've seen it as well. Like, for example, we've seen the odd kind of movement toward the acknowledgements of it, I should say. For example, like Hardik Pandya for Mumbai Indians in the IPL. And he obviously in salutes. So, I mean, if we bring it towards obviously the cricketing conversation, Rajiv, obviously you give some kind of historical context to what we're going to be discussing going forward here. How do you feel like, I mean, obviously, if you bring up some maybe cricketing examples where you feel like maybe this has been prevalent, what you've experienced, wherever you feel like it's been present in the cricketing game over the last 20, 30, 40 years?
Well, okay, for me, I was thinking when Sachin Tendulkar played his last ever Test match in 2013, which was in Mumbai against the West Indies, in the ground at the Wankhede Stadium, there were advertising boards with the Skin Lightening Cream on offer. Now, how does a guest feel when you come to their home to celebrate Sachin Tendulkar, great career, 24 years of it, and you've got placards around the ground advertising this, and you're a West Indian player? How does that West Indian player feel? Fair and lovely, those are the creams. Then the 1996 World Cup, I read this book, War Minus the Shooting. It's a fantastic book about the 96 World Cup, and they said in there, the author said, Brian Lara came out to bat and the Indian crowd were yelling out that colour word. Now, in England, you can't get away with it because everyone speaks English around the world anyway. In India, and especially in 1996, the broadcasters probably wouldn't have understood. They couldn't understand, and they could get away with it. That's another thing. He'd get away with it. So that's another thing. Then we saw what happened to Andrew Simons in India in about the early 2000s. He was subjected to monkey taunts in the stadium in India. Now, nothing happened there. Why wasn't anything sanctioned? Why wasn't the ICC sanctioning those Indian cricket grounds? Why wasn't that made more of an issue, which it should have been? And I read Michael Clarke's autobiography last year, and he talked about that incident with Simons and what happened in in Australia with Harbhajan Singh.
Yeah.
And Andrew Simons said in the book to Michael Clarke, he quotes him, and he said, "They get away with it." And to me, that sums it off. And when he's saying they, who I'm talking about, they get away with it, and they do. So that's Simon's thing. Then Darren Sammy, just this year, he's only found out now that he, like me, was called colour, along with another Sri Lankan player playing for an IPL team. Now, has anything been done? Has the BCCI, the Indian Cricket Board, done anything about this? Have they investigated it? Have they done a review of who, have they interviewed the players who were in that team, the Indian players, and said, if you were using the equivalent of the N-word without this person understanding that term behind his back, to him, Darren Sammy, the West Indian player, and I can't remember the Sri Lankan player, I think it's Fernando, but I can't remember. Now, he would have known what colour meant. How were they feeling in this IPL team? So tell me, an Indian player now comes and plays county cricket in England, or league cricket. If he hears the P word at him, and you know what the P word is, I'm sure, can you imagine what would happen? The Indian Cricket Board would go crazy. You've seen what happened with Rafiq. Again, I'm not condemning Rafiq for what he's done and the other Asian players in Yorkshire. They have absolutely every right to do what they're doing. But can you just imagine if it was the other way around? Well, not the other way around, but it's done within the internal system of Asia. Then if Sri Lankan complains, no one really gives them much, like the way I have. No one's really, or if it's a white person insulting, the other way around, an Asian doing it to Andrew Simons, again, nothing's happened. Why are we making a big deal of this? And then I'll give you another. Small person on the cricket back. Sorry, come on.
Didn't the players who were making racial jokes towards Darren Sammy. I believe he's played for Sunrisers Hyderabad about 3-4 years ago. Didn't those players come out and apologise to him? Wasn't it?
I heard Ishant Sharma did,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great, and that's a great thing he did. And again, maybe Ishant Sharma was just doing it in a joking term, and as I said, I've got no problem with people doing it to me. It's the tone in what, it's not what you say, it's the tone. If they're saying, oh, Raj, that's fine. If you do it in a jovial, it's a silly thing, it's fine. But here, Darren Sammy didn't know what it meant. They were doing it behind his back, or they were doing it in front of him, effectively in a coded language that he didn't understand.
So is your issue here then, Rajiv, that the BCI didn't actually take this more seriously?
Yes.
Especially in light of, because obviously everything came out, as you know, after when the B-Lane, obviously when George Floyd and obviously this tragic incident occurred, and then everything happened afterwards, and obviously all these racial incidents came out in cricket, in league cricket, in county cricket, all these things came out. Obviously Darren Sammy was also there as well, and obviously he came up at this point because he felt there's such a strong movement towards this now, and there's like a spotlight being shone on this, therefore it's a good time now to discuss such a matter, because it will give more gravitas and more exposure, basically. So Darren Sammy comes out of it now and said to him, is it because is your frustration the fact that he's, I said, basically gone public with this, and you feel like it hasn't been treated like other racial matters have been treated? For example, I've seen Rafiq. He obviously has talked about that was continual prejudice in what he says from various players, people, the management, etc. It sounds horrifying. I'm sure you heard his story now, which has been corroborated by the likes of Ron Naveed Al Hassan. He's corroborated the story, hasn't he, with his own opinion on the whole thing. So obviously that's been taken to task. Yorkshire in a full investigation. The South Yorkshire League chairman, I can't remember his name, Roger Pugh, is it? He resigned, as you know, from chair, because after the comments he's made, the disgusting comments that he made, he would actually resign now. I'm sure he's pushed to resign anyway. So all this furor has been kind of created. But is your major issue that because it involves Indian players making these lewd comments, that it's not been taken as serious, because is your anger really with the Indian players, or is it with the BCCI not doing anything about it?
I think it's just a general. I go back to the Andrew Simons thing. They get away with it. And for me, it's the players doing it is one thing, but there's got to be some kind of an official apology or something to make it more meaningful. And I just don't think that's coming from the BCCI. And I also
nothing to acknowledge the BLM movement, did they? I thought before the game.
I'm aware of no. But for the specific incident, with the Darren Sammy, I don't know of any official apology or
pre-game. There was nothing done between both sides. But to be fair, between England and Australia, apparently Finch and Morgan agreed not to do anything either. That's why Michael Holding came out, obviously, with his comments. Like, should we continue? Can't just be a flash in the pan, that's it, move on. 3TC tournament, the South African, gimmick tournament, it was, that obviously they made a gesture, but nothing was done in the IPL. But this may be, like you said, I'm not telling you what your opinion, I'm just not trying to put words in your mouth, but is your opinion maybe that this fits in line with the kind of Indian attitudes towards skin color and differentiating between different skin tones and prejudice? It's almost like it's okay. It's between to make fun of someone with darker skin. It's not been,
it's sort of like I think they're getting better at it, but I think it's more like it's okay for us to do it, but if we're on the receiving end, we won't tolerate it. And that's that kind of ethos that I can't really get my head around. And I just don't want to make this an Indian thing. This happens on another level within Sri Lanka. So within the Sri Lankan community, and I'm not just trying to bash Indian people there. Of course, I'm not. It happens in the Sri Lankan microcosm. So you've got the Sinhalese and the Tamils. And again, I have a lot of Sinhalese friends. Friends, of course they are. I've got no issue. But you sometimes go to a family function and you've got people from both communities, and they'll say, "Oh, yeah, I think he's Tamil because he's quite dark." They have to add that on. But like with the I've noticed with them and with the Indians, if there's an Indian person who's dark, it's not really registered, it's not raised. So, for example, when I was with my school friends and I see Vinod Kambli, the great Vinod Kambli, coming out to bat,
Yeah.
or Venkatapattu Raju, they never mentioned the skin color. And some of my school friends, his sister,
Raju from Spinner.
yeah, from the early 90s, so I
Yeah.
try to model my
Yeah.
action.
Yeah.
One of my school friends, his sister is quite dark. He never mentions it, and I've brought it up with him. One of my other friends, his uncle, I saw him at his wedding. Again, dark. It doesn't bother me, but I get the feeling that they'll raise the issue or make note of the dark skin if it's Sri Lankan, South Indian. But if it's their own, then they just cover it. It's not reference. It's like yeah, whatever. So that's another thing. And then if you look now at what's happening with the US elections, if I may bring that in, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, please,
So that kind of dismissiveness, sneering attitude, which I referenced to with my ex-girlfriend from university. Again, when it comes to South Indian, they'll say, "Oh, he's South Indian," the northern states. But as soon as that person becomes successful, that South bit is dropped and he becomes Indian. So, for example, the greatest Indian mathematician, Sivaramajan, there's a movie done by Dev Patel, played him in a movie, The Man Who Knew Infinity. He's from the Tamil South. You've got the great tennis player, India's greatest tennis players are Krishnan and Vijay Amritaj. They're from the South. And now Kamala Harris. It's really interesting because today, Sanjeev Bhaskar, who was in Goodness Gracious Me, he tweeted saying, "Oh, she's Indian," and he was putting on tweet. He was really happy about it and celebrating. Great, no problem. But you rewind to Goodness Gracious Me, which was in the 1990s. There was a sketch in there when he was mocking South Indians for being dark. He said, "Oh, it must be a South Indian because South Indian must be dark, something like that." I can't remember the exact sketch. But now Kamala is the most powerful Indian in the world, or will be. She's Tamil Nadu, but now the whole Indian bandwagon are, getting on this Indian train and saying, "Oh, she's Indian." The South has been dropped. And if you read the Financial Times from the 3rd or 4th of November, I got published in there a letter referencing this point. And it got a lot of praise and a lot of hits. So, for those who are reading this, go on to the Financial Times. And I also wrote in 2018 about how Indians are obsessed with skin color between the North and South. That's June 2018. So you can do my name on the Financial Times and you see it. And again, it got a lot of good responses. And the other thing which I've found really interesting in this whole South Asian dynamic growing up in a community like that at school is when India were doing well, succeeding, a lot of the people in my year, they can't speak they generally can't really speak their native language as far as I remember. They didn't really play the game, but that's not really an issue. But whenever India toured England, they were fully Indian, J-Ho with the flag and supporting it. Great, don't get me wrong. But because I was the only one from Sri Lanka, I was just sort of like dismissed. And the irony is that I compared it later, many years later, to them, and I put it back to them, and I said, "Guys, have you heard of the Ryder Cup?" I'm not a golf person, but the Ryder Cup, for those who don't know, it's a tournament between Europe and the USA, and it's a European team that play them every 2 years. And in there, you've got different states of Europe representing Europe in the golf tournament. Now, for whatever reason, there are not many French people who play that. I don't know why, I'm not a golf person. So I said to them, and most of them were from states in India that had no representation in the Indian team. So I said to them, "You're all supporting this team." My ex-girlfriend was from that. And I asked her, I said, "You're all doing this and you're going J-O India. Name me one person from your state that's representing the Indian team." There's none. There's not a single one. Ironically, or not ironically, Tamil Nadu is 40% of the Indian team over the last 17 to 80 years that India's played cricket have continually provided players to the national team. Now, I'm not from Tamil Nadu, I'm a Tamil Sri Lankan, but that's still my community. I.e., ergo, I have more reason to be supporting India. You have Ravichandran, Ashwin, Murali, Karthik, Vijay Murali, the list goes on. Venkata Garavagan, the other Murali Vijay, Karthik, the name is Ashwin is India's best bowler. I have more reason to support them, And I got the feeling that a lot of the Indians who I lived with, who I associated with in England, they just assumed Tamil equaled Sri Lankan. They didn't get that actually there's 70 million Tamils in South India, and there's only like 2 million in Sri Lanka, more than their state communities were. And here they were going, oh, India this, India World Cup. I was like, well, you know, they won in 2011. Who should have been celebrating, you or me? So it's those kind of things. And I'll give you another example just on another personal note. My ex-wife, she's Punjabi, and you know, she, after all this irony, the biggest irony after all this, I married the most northern Indian, but anyway, that's the biggest bloody joke. So, and, lovely girl, I'm still in touch with her, and we're still friends, and no issue at all, but we divorced amicably. Anyway, now when we first met, she told her extended family that she was going out with a Tamil Sri Lankan. Now this is Punjabi, telling her family at home, I'm not there, her cousins and all that, but she's going out with a Punjabi. Can you guess what kind of mickey taking, taunting and mocking she received on the back of that? Now I wasn't there. She had comments like, oh, you know, you're going to have to keep going on a holiday in order to keep up with your tan. You're lowering your standards is one of the things she got. You're lowering your standards. You can do better. So remember that. That's what I remembered. Now, my ex-wife told me this, and then she was very upset. And I said, and at the time I just pretended not to be. And I said, look, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. But the amount of comments I but between a Punjabi and a Tamil wedding, you know, I got comments, oh, there's going to be all light here and all dark here. I got all of this before I was getting married. But my ex-wife, she never did anything like that. She was never like that. Obviously, she would have married me, otherwise would she? But again, if it's done in a joking way and a fun, you know, like we're all having a laugh, like some of my white friends do it in a joking way, it's completely fine. I've got no issue with it. I mean, I haven't, others might. But if it's done in a tone that comes across as that anger, hate, disgust, then that's when I have my issue. And so I was checking my other notes there. And again, I know, to finish off just before, is I know I'm doing whataboutism. And for those who don't know, that means you're sort of deflecting the issue by saying, like, so if for those who may not know, so for I'm saying like, oh, a white person's being racist to a brown, and I'm going, well, yeah, so what? Brown people are more racist amongst themselves. That still does not address the issue of the white person being racist, which is still wrong. Let's address that, and then, you know, simultaneously do this. So I know what I'm deflecting.
Right, you know, two wrongs don't make a right scenario, which you see. You know, it's like I think I mentioned to you previously about this, Rajiv. Like in South Africa, you're seeing a lot of comments now on forums where that you'll have issues between white South Africans and, let's say, black Africans, and black Africans will obviously talk about BLM and how important it is, and then the white South Africans will be commenting and saying stuff like, oh, but what about the farmers who've been murdered? You know, just what about you? Again, just deflecting, like you said. You know, the don't make a right, as we know, and the cliche goes, but it's true. But anyway, yeah, sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to mention that.
No, it's a
you mentioned this, obviously, I think we discussed outside off camera about Abhinav Mukund and his incidents, the treatment he received for his King College. Do you want to just delve a bit more into that, Rajiv?
Yeah, so Abhinav Mukund, Tamil Nadu batsman, yet again, another Tamil Nadu batsman, open for India. And he put a tweet out. I'm not on Twitter, but I read about it in the papers. He said something along the lines of, look, I'm dark-skinned, okay, get over it, guys. It's not my fault. What do you want me to do? I'm trying to represent my country, and I'm doing a damn good job of it. I'm a professional. You know, it's like, what is it that you want me to do? He's echoing what I've just said in this thing. Yes, he's dark. Yes, get on with it. He's still a bloody amazing batsman. And, you know, it's just like, you know, growing up at school, like when my friends, the first thing they would say when they met like one of my relatives, oh, he's really fair for a Sri Lankan. He's really fair. It's like the shock. It's like, oh my God, he's really fair. Like your sister, Raji, she looks nothing. But you don't mention, why can't you mention something like, oh, she's got lovely eyebrows or something like that? Why do you have to keep going here? Why do we have to keep going here? Why can't you mention, oh, she's quite tall, you know, for a lady, she's 5'9", she's quite tall. Oh, you know, oh, I didn't realize she was left-handed like you. It must run in the family. Why the hell? She's got lovely blue eyes. Why do you have to mention this every time? why? There's more. There's more to life than this. And I'll give you a thing. My friends got very annoyed with me because I kept bringing it up. I kept harassing it. I kept putting, and then finally it culminated in me getting it published, thankfully, in the FT. So that kind of like quieted me down a bit. But I did. I annoyed them, and I'm not proud of that. But I've apologised and I've cleared the air. And now I'm like, guys, it's okay to have a bit of a laugh with it. It's fine. But I guess what I didn't realise is that we were all growing up as teenagers, and we didn't realise that some things you can't say are PC. And and the fact is, why would they treat me like a brother, which they do? All these Indian people, they treat me, they treat me like a brother. If they really had a problem, they wouldn't be my friend. So I've also had to look at myself and realize, you know what, maybe I didn't say things correctly in the past. I'm sure I've done some mistakes. But I still wanted to raise this issue in a cricket-related forum, which is, where I'm happy asked. And yeah, I mean, I just think it just needs to be addressed and brought up. And while we keep mentioning about PML, which is highly important, of course it is, let's also raise the profile of this as well.
Yeah, I'm glad we had this chat today, Rajiv, because I think a lot of people, especially myself, I mean, I'm sure many more people like me, are not aware of this kind of, these prejudice to skin color in a similar, I mean, not same controversy, but similar regions in Southeast Asia. And you have this, I mean, I was obviously aware of, skin lighting creams, and I know, obviously, from Bollywood and things like that, that there is a distinctive kind of viewpoints on darker skinned people and light skinned people in India, because you see, for example, in the media and the public, just in the public eye, I always feel like people with lighter skin are kind of put on a slight more of a pedestal. See in Bollywood, from what I've seen, generally you'll find that the leads, actors and actresses, are of a lighter skin tone. And I think they said, because I know that skin lighting creams it's a huge business in India, and that kind of billion-dollar industry, you see. So yeah, you see. So just to say that, I mean, obviously, there's no smoke without a fire. What you're talking about here is not just tap, because you're saying you had a couple of personal experiences, and you're maybe potentially. So I'm not saying it gnaws at you still, but obviously it might still. You might obviously probably be annoyed a little bit when you still think about it, because I know I do when I think about what I went through 25, 30 years ago.
It does, but
you move on. Like I said, I think we've obviously got still. Let's say there is some substance what we're talking about here today. I think it's in light of the BLM movement. It's important to address that there's racism occurring in all different levels between all different races. It's not. I think people think BLM and think black and white. It's really not. It's really not. It's far deeper than that. And I don't think anyone's really talking about this, to be completely honest with you. I know that the reality is this video should go hopefully to a lot of people. People need to know about this stuff. Now, people can disagree. I'm sure they are. If you're out there, if you're watching, you've got any comments you want to make, no problem, good or bad. Especially, I think, I would say, Rajiv, we invite people with from an Indian background, because we should try and push out there, because it'd be interesting to see what the kind of feedback is to what you're saying. Because I'd like to know, were people in denial, or people actually acknowledge the fact, like your friends have. I'm sure they acknowledge that it's it's one thing being a joke and between mates, like making a little comments. I think I understand to a certain extent, even if that's not really, it shouldn't be said, but it is. But it's another thing to actually be publicly people being discriminated for the skin color, a tone of skin, should I say, with the same demographic.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that point. Thursday or Friday, when I got my letter in about Kamala Harris in the Financial Times, and just to remind everyone, what I wrote is that so basically Kamala Harris was taunted at a Republican convention just a few days before the election started last week, and a Republican senator had mocked the pronunciation of her first name, and said Kamala, something derogatory. So I wrote in and said, while it was great that the Indian diaspora in America condemned this, I said there's also a bit of irony, because North Indians make fun of the South for the Tamil language, for the linguistic characteristics of the tone of the language. And you look at any South Asian sketch show, there's always one scene where the North Indian is ridiculed for his skin color or the Tamil language. So I said, and I said, this is yet another example. I finished it off with, this is yet another example of the East complaining about the West for racial slurs when they themselves have not addressed the prejudice within their own community localities. Now that went on the FT, the printed version. I uploaded a copy of it onto Facebook. And going back to what your point about acknowledgement, I've got about, I don't know, 150 people on my Facebook, maybe less than that. Out of the 10 people who liked it, and 10 is quite low for me, not one single like came from a North Indian. They came from 6 white guys and ladies, another Sri Lankan, another South Indian. Not a single like came, and I would have expected there to have been a like from any of the North Indians on my Facebook, because they usually like everything I write. I have posts like, I'm sure you've seen them, my silly one-line jokes and things like that.
Yeah.
I get loads of likes for that, and I thought, you know, for the 10 people, maybe I'm making too much of an assumption here, making too much of a big deal, but not. And I get the feeling that they get scared to acknowledge their shortcomings here. They don't want to acknowledge and say, you know, and you know, with this Kamala thing, you've got two things. With Kamala Harris, Vice President, you get one section where everyone's getting on the Indian bandwagon, even though she's from the South. But then I also get a feeling that some of them are like, oh yeah, well, she is from the South. So I'm getting that bit of a dichotomy there. Is she really one of us? So it's a bit of both. I can't really work out that point yet.
That when people are successful, that they drop the kind of the prefix. It's not South Indian anymore. It's just Indian. So she's obviously, like I said before, you're quite right in saying she's one of the most powerful Indian people in the world now. So isn't she just typical? No matter where you're from in India, north, south, east, west, she's Indian, isn't she? You would just take her as, oh, she's Indian. You know, you're proud to be associated with her. You know?
Yeah, I think she's become Indian because she's been successful. But I go back to that point where they're South Indian until they become successful. And that appeared in August 21st. If you look at my other FT letter, I've had 10 in the thing, mostly about India. So 21st of August, there's one about that, how Kamala's now from the South, and suddenly all of India is sort of getting on that bandwagon. It goes back to like Vijay Amritaj, R. Krishnan, Ravichandran Ashwin, you know, the Srinivas Ramanujan, the mathematician. You know, they all suddenly become my namesake, Radhakrishnan, the second president of India. You know, they become Indian after success.
Yeah, so it's quite a sad state of affairs, isn't it? Really, when you say things like that. I mean, thank you, Rajiv, for this. I mean, I'm sure we could probably cover another hour or so, but I think the place kind of stopped there. We can maybe do a part 2 at some point. I'd like to see what the kind of feedback is on this video. I think we just need to get out there and see what the feedback we get. We might get some other people maybe on for a second, for you know, kind of an alternative viewpoint on this matter. I mean, I've got a little bit of knowledge, but obviously, as you know, from my background, I'm not really that well versed in kind of Indian culture and from this perspective, anyway. So yeah, it'd be good to maybe do a part 2 on this. I mean, I think like we said before, just to kind of round it up back in the cricket. I do hope that this is kind of, I think, whilst maybe there's no obviously formal investigation done by the BCCI of what Darren Sammy said, I do think it hopefully will raise awareness. I'm hoping that, you know, going forward, people are now less tolerant towards these kind of derogatory statements, as Sammy now obviously highlighted and exposed. I think obviously if a black player now is called Kala, he said, he will now know what that means. Because the reality is, there could have been so many black players who have been called this, and they won't know because you won't know the word. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, hopefully now, the fact of just simply bringing it into the limelight, into the spotlight, that it's almost like through pure embarrassment, if nothing else, that this hopefully should dissipate. You hope anyway, you should dissipate. I mean, it probably won't be completely eradicated, but I'd like to think that, you know, it just sheds light on this on a matter which I don't think gets much attention. You know, these attitudes in Indian culture towards you know, dark skinned people, and how it's affected the cricket game, basically.
Yeah. But I don't want to leave this with any kind of thought that the audience thinks I'm bitter or anything. You know, I'm smiling. I'm completely not okay, but it doesn't upset me, and I just want this raised, and I don't want people thinking that I have some anger or bitterness towards India. Why should I? I am more reason to be Indian than anything. I am Tamil, maybe Tamil Sri Lankan, but India, the first inhabitants generally are considered to be the Tamil. Why would I hate India? Of course I don't. It's my country, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't want people to think that I have some anti-Indian or anti-South Asian thing. I'm not like that at all. I love watching Tendulkar and I love watching Wasim Akram Bowl. They're my two heroes from the region. So as long as the audience don't think that, and just be aware that I've just brought this issue up, a talking point, which I think needs to be addressed, just like it needs to be addressed that, David Gower's the greatest batsman of all time.
I was wondering when you're going to get David Gower in there. I know you're a big fan of Gower. So, but yeah, no, we'll finish on that note, Rajiv. Thank you so much for coming onto the channel again.
Thank you.
That was great. It was great. And yeah, obviously we've got Sri Lanka. Hopefully the Sri Lanka test will be going ahead. England visiting early next year. So if we don't get you back on before then, we'll definitely get you on obviously for the preview to test series. So yeah, that'll be great. And yeah, I think it's good place to wrap it up really. So yeah, guys, if you enjoy the content, please do like, share, subscribe. Like I said, this video is a bit different to what I normally do. You don't normally tune the fat about an upcoming test match or an ODI or something else, or I'm slagging off some other cricketer. But yeah, it is a little different. Hopefully you didn't mind it. Hope you enjoyed the kind of variation in what we done there today. And yeah, hopefully see you again on the next video. All right, cheers, guys.
Thanks very much, guys. Thank you.